on GitHub. And all I did was kind of frame out the base necessities. So there's nothing out there that you wouldn't be able to create on your own, but it gives you kind of a starting point. I just named it Pac-Man. It's a JavaFX project. I have application, application.controller, and application.model. We had framed out that whole UML diagram with all the different classes that we needed, so I just framed out all of those classes. The first one that we need to look at is main, and all it does is launch main.fxml. So main.fxml should load the first page, and then I have 3 controllers: main controller, game controller, and scoreboard controller. Game model and user are my current model, so everything that I need to be able to model my stuff in Eclipse. So if I launch main.fxml, let's look at main controller. I'll have an event handler that listens for action events. I have a name field and an error message. So let's go ahead and take a look at main.fxml. Again, I did this on my own because I feel like you should be able to handle dragging and dropping some of these things, but I added just a label for Pac-Man so we know what game we're playing, set up a default size for the window, added a prompt here that says enter your name, and then a box, a text field, and then a start button. So the text field, I actually gave it in the code. If you go over to code, it's called name field. So the only things that I need as a user, or from the controller perspective, is when the user enters their name and when they click that button. If they do anything else on this page, I kind of don't care. They can hit enter, they can do whatever else they want to. But I only care when they enter their name and they hit the start button. If they hit the start button, I want to go ahead and do handle, and when they enter their name, I want to pull from the name field and do something useful for it. So I actually don't need an ID on the button because it's the only button on that view. So that's not so bad. So in my main controller, what we're going to do is we're going to have a handle method, and we have the name field set up with an @fxml tag to indicate that it's inside of the fxml. And I also added something in here that you couldn't see. It's a label for an error message. So if the user does something incorrectly, I want to make sure that we kind of slap them on the hand right then and there. We don't have to pop up another box. We just tell them, hey, you didn't put your name in. There's a problem. So in the handle method, first things first, I'm going to get the information out of the string field. So name field.getText will give me back the text from that field. And then I want to do some checking. So if name's not null and the length of their name is greater than 1, so they need to put in something that's more than just a, give me something else, at least 2 digits. Then I'm going to do everything that I need. So I'm going to need to save maybe the user information to a profile, load their profile information, then show them the game. Or if it's not, if either name is null or the length is 1 or less, I'm going to give them an error message. So error message set text to whatever I want to. In this case, it says invalid name entered. Please enter 1+ characters. So that only shows if I know the name of that label. So there's a label down here that's actually empty right now. There's no text in it. So if I go into the properties for it, first in the code I can see it's named error message. If I go to properties, there's no text in it, and it's automatically set to red. So whatever I put in there is going to show up red. So this is a good way of handling our exceptions. There's no try-catch in here. I didn't have to do anything fancy. There's no throws or anything else, but I'm handling any possible exceptions that can happen on the front page. The only thing that could possibly happen is they entered, an invalid name. So I'm going to do that, and then this will only show up if the user enters something improperly, and if they don't, then they never see that error message kind of stuff. So I'm going to close this down. I'll run the program just so we can see what it looks like. It's not running the program. Run this program. There we go. All right, so Pac-Man looks good. If I enter my name, if I skip this and I hit start, whoop. Start. Really? Live demos don't work.
Is it not auto-sizing
Because you didn't stretch out the label?
Yeah.
That's it right there.
Yeah, I was gonna say this just works, but it's because I'm connected to this ridiculous size display. All right, so we'll go into our main.fxml scene builder. Do you want me to stretch out the label? So to get access to something that doesn't show up on here, I'm gonna go over here and click it in my document, and I should make it bigger. Is that good?
I would just say wrap text as well.
invalid kind of message, and if I enter my name and I say ABC, it's gonna hit start, but nothing happens because I just have a few to-dos inside of my controller. So we'll need to set that up. But the next thing that I want to happen is for it to show me a game. So game.fxml, I'll open out Scene Builder. Right now, there's a whole lot of nothing. So we're gonna have to go in there and kind of sort out how we wanna organize our game. So it'll be a separate discussion here in a second. And then scoreboard.fxml is gonna be something that we show maybe the leaderboard for everything. So after you lose the game, because at some point you lose, we wanna be able to show the high scores for Pac-Man. So I want a list view, so we've got kind of like a tiled pane going on here. And then there's a list view in here with a label for high scores and a button for start over. Start over will bring them back to the first page. They can log back in and kind of start the game all over again. So I want a controller for each one of these FXML files. So we have a main controller, a game controller. Game controller should do two things. First, when we load the page, I need to initialize the game. So I need to show them the game to start out with. So that means I need to load level 1, for example. And then by default, I should also show the user's name maybe at the top of the screen, what level they're on, what their score is, some of that basic information. Now we're gonna go with Atari Classic here. Every time they start over, they get level 1, and then they have to run through, and you run through until you die, and then that's it. And then again, level 1, we decided we're gonna take it easy to begin with. There's gonna be no ghosts yet, but maybe level 2 will have ghosts. And then our handle method has to be whenever the user clicks something. The only thing I want to handle in the game is when the user does something properly. So if they start clicking on Pac-Man, I don't really care. The only thing I want to do is handle when they do up, down, left, right. So we're going to use regular arrow keys for this and be super lame gamers. When we move Pac-Man around, I need to move him based on the user input. So if they hit up, I need to first check the model to make sure that it's okay to move him up. Sometimes it won't be okay because there's going to be a wall there. I need to make sure it's okay first so he doesn't walk through walls. And then my scoreboard controller is going to have a list view of some sort. I need to decide what kind of list view I'm going to have. Probably a list view of users, right? Whatever my model is going to contain. I should initialize that as well, because before the user sees it, it needs to initialize some content. So I didn't need it initialized for main controller because there's nothing to initialize. It was just some Pac-Man and an entry kind of thing. But I need to initialize for the other two because I need to show some information first. So first I'm going to get the high score listing from the model. So let the model worry about how to handle high scores. And then update that list view with it. And then when they click the button, I need to do the handle method. So when they click the start over button, it's going to lead them back to main.fxml so that they can start from the beginning again, true Atari style. So we have a couple of controllers set up. I'm going to have a user class. The user is going to have a name, a high score, or current score maybe, what they currently have. That's kind of shown on the thing. We may or may not need this. Let's hold this little here. Need this? I need to initialize a user with a name. I can't have users running around with no names on them. And get name. I should be able to get the user's name at some point in time. I may also want a getter for a high score, so I'll probably add in some things in here to do more getters. And maybe some setters. And then our game model. So before we had that library and a bunch of books, this time we have users and a bunch of high scores or something. So if it's kind of vague like that, I'm going to have a game model. In this case, I've kind of put off the decision of what kind of collection I'm going to use. I'm going to use a private collection of users, but I don't know what kind of collection yet. And this is where you can kind of be ambiguous about it until you actually initialize the users themselves. And so as long as I have a bunch of users that usually play this game, I should be able to get a user out. So I can actually create get user without even knowing what kind of collection it is by passing in their username. And then I'll loop through each one of the users, p.getName equals name. If that's the case, I'll return p, otherwise I'll return null. So if somebody asks for a user like ABC, and ABC doesn't exist, they're going to get null back, so it's their job to check that, which means I should probably put that in the Java comment, just to make sure that they know what's coming on the off chance that they do call this. So that's all I can do for now because I don't know what kind of collection this is going to be. But I should make this available, I should be able to get users from this, and then I need to make the game model available elsewhere inside of the class itself, or the project. close these up. So our main controller, the first thing is I need to load the next view. So I want to load the next view the same way that I load anything else. So I'm going to copy and paste a lot of this code over here. I can actually put it inside of the main class. So what I wind up doing, especially for smaller projects like this, is creating a separate helper method in the main class. So I'll create a public static load next view. And that method's going to be pretty much the same as what I do usually, except it needs to take in a string fxml file. fxml string. There we go. Call it fxml string. It needs to return something. I'll just say void. And what it should do is load in whatever I passed in. So in this case, instead of loading main every time, I'll load in fxml string. And again, you're always going to have helper methods for this. In the real world, there's actually going to be something else that you call just like this. It's not going to be on you to recreate all of this stuff over and over. Obviously, in the real world, you're also probably going to be doing mobile or web development too. So you're not going to be worried about desktop environment as much. But if I call load next view, I should make it static so I can say main.load next view. I don't have to pass in things like primary stage. I should be able to make that available. So I'm going to go ahead and make a, oops, not there, here. I'm going to make access to the stage. In this case, I'll make it private. So I'll make a stage here, stage, main stage. And then I'll set stage in here to whatever is passed in. So the first time we get the primary stage, I can set this.main stage equal to primary stage. So I'm going to stave the stage out later on. It'll enable me to take out all of this code. So I'm going to nuke this entirely. I'm going to call load next view with what parameters? What do I pass in? You can do it again. That's it. And I can actually make this static since it's just a stage, and I don't need this anymore. All right. So the only thing I need to do in main is set up my primary stage and then load next view. And what this got me was being able to call this method inside of my main controller. So when I want to load the next view here, I can say main, the name of the class, dot load next view. And in this case, I want to pass it on to game.fxml instead. So now I don't have to recreate all of that code. I have a helper method in any controller that I want. When I want to load the next view, instead of replicating the code over and over again, I'm going to create a helper method. So anytime you find yourself doing that, creating like lots and lots of the same code over and over again, create those nice little helper methods where they're handy. It did change my main, but it kind of keeps everything the same. And this should work pretty well. So let's just test it out real quick. I got Pac-Man, I say ABC, I hit start, and it loaded another fxml, so that must be my game because it doesn't have anything in there. So that's it. I'll let you guys go. We'll pick up